I'm Alexandra, 35 years old, and 7 years ago, I founded Horizon Analytics from my cramped apartment with nothing but determination and a vision. Last year, I stepped back from daily operations but kept my 61% ownership quiet. Enter Christian, our polished new CEO, who spent 6 months systematically dismantling everything I built before calling me into his office. "You're replaceable," he said with a cold smile. Little did he know I was about to teach him about corporate mathematics. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know which city you're tuning in from, and hit that subscribe button to join me for more stories about standing your ground in the corporate world. The journey to founding Horizon Analytics started long before I ever imagined owning my own company. After completing my master's in data science from MIT, I was determined to revolutionize how businesses use data. My professors always said I had a knack for seeing patterns others missed, but what they didn't realize was that this skill would eventually lead me to build something truly innovative. I cut my teeth working at Tech Fusion, one of those mammoth corporations where great ideas went to die in endless committee meetings. My supervisor, Janet Miller, was the only one who recognized my potential. "Alexandra," she told me one evening, as we reviewed quarterly reports, "you're wasting your talent fixing other people's problems. You should be building solutions of your own." That conversation planted a seed, but the real catalyst came when I developed an algorithm that could predict customer behavior with unprecedented accuracy. I excitedly presented it to senior management, only to watch them shelve it because it didn't align with their current strategy. That night I went home, opened my laptop, and registered the domain name for Horizon Analytics. Raising capital was my first brutal lesson in gender bias within tech. I still remember walking into a venture capital firm on Boylston Street, armed with my business plan and prototype. The man across the table barely glanced at my presentation before asking, "Who's the technical lead on your team?" "Your husband," I walked out, determined to prove I didn't need their money to succeed. The first 6 months were brutal. I worked out of my apartment, living on ramen and coffee coding until 3 in the morning. My savings dwindled rapidly, but I refused to give up. The breakthrough came when I refined my algorithm to not just analyze data, but to present actionable insights in real time. This wasn't just another analytics tool. It was a revolution in how businesses could respond to market changes. My first client was a small e-commerce company that took a chance on me. When their sales increased 30% in just 2 months using my platform, word spread quickly. Within a year, I had enough clients to rent a small office space in Cambridge and hire my first employees. Diana came on as head of sales, bringing her Rolodex of connections and infectious enthusiasm. Madison joined as lead developer, her quiet brilliance complementing my more conceptual approach. Lawrence became our first customer success manager, his patience perfect for helping clients understand our technology. We were a small but mighty team, united by the belief that we were building something special. The growing pains were intense. There were nights I slept under my desk rather than go home, weeks where I couldn't pay myself but made sure my team received their salaries. My personal life became virtually non-existent. 2 relationships fell apart because I couldn't give them the time they deserved. My mother stopped asking when I'd visit because the answer was always after this launch or once we secure this contract. Professor Harold from MIT became an unexpected mentor, stopping by with takeout when he suspected I wasn't eating properly and offering sage advice about scaling a tech company. Janet left Tech Fusion to join our board of advisors, believing in my vision enough to risk her reputation on a startup. The moment we hit 10 million in revenue felt surreal. We moved to a larger office overlooking the Charles River, expanded to 30 employees, and began attracting interest from major corporations. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies who valued our ability to translate complex data into strategic advantages. With growth came the need for a more structured board. I carefully selected members who believed in our mission: Thomas, from venture capital; Sophia, with her legal expertise; Michael, who understood enterprise sales; and 2 industry veterans who could provide objective guidance. What no one knew was that I was struggling. The constant pressure, the 18-hour days, and the weight of responsibility for my employees had taken its toll. When I developed stress-induced migraines that landed me in the hospital for 3 days, my doctor delivered a stark warning: change your lifestyle or prepare for worse consequences. This forced me to make a difficult decision. Horizon Analytics needed leadership that could take it to the next level while I recovered and refocused on the innovation that was my true passion. The board supported my decision to step back from daily operations and move into a Chief Innovation Officer role, leading the search committee for a new CEO. Christian Parker emerged as the standout candidate. Harvard MBA successful exits at 2 tech startups, and the charisma to inspire confidence in investors and employees alike. During his interviews, he spoke about scaling with integrity and respecting the company's foundation while building for the future. I cast my vote for him with genuine optimism. What I didn't tell Christian or the board was that I maintained 61% ownership of the company. My mentor Janet had given me a piece of advice years ago that stuck with me. Sometimes you learn the most about people by watching how they act when they don't know who holds the power. I wanted our new CEO to lead without the shadow of the founder looking over his shoulder to make decisions based on what was best for the company, not what might please the majority shareholder. In retrospect, this decision to remain quietly in control would prove to be both my greatest vulnerability and my ultimate strength. The day Christian arrived at Horizon Analytics, the office had been transformed. Fresh flowers adorned the reception area, a professional banner welcomed him by name, and there was a palpable buzz of excitement among the staff. I had encouraged this warm reception, wanting him to feel valued from day one. Christian certainly looked the part of a successful CEO. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. His credentials were impressive: Harvard MBA, with honors, successful leadership at 2 previous tech companies that had been acquired for substantial sums, and connections throughout the industry that could open doors for us. We held a welcome party in our largest conference room where I introduced Christian to the entire company. Today marks an exciting new chapter for Horizon Analytics. I announced, genuinely believing it. Christian brings the experience and vision to help us reach heights I could only dream of when I started this company at my kitchen table. When Christian took the microphone, he was charismatic and compelling. "What Alexandra has built is remarkable," he said, his voice warm, with apparent admiration. "My job isn't to replace that foundation, but to build upon it. Together, we're going to turn this impressive company into an industry titan." The employees erupted in applause, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was exactly what Horizon needed: a seasoned leader who respected our roots while bringing fresh perspective. The first executive meeting under Christian's leadership seemed promising. He asked thoughtful questions about our operations, customer acquisition strategy, and product roadmap. Yet I noticed something subtle. Whenever I offered historical context about why certain decisions had been made, Christian would nod politely before quickly moving on, as though my input was interesting, but not particularly relevant. "We need to elevate our brand positioning," Christian announced in our 3rd week. "The current identity feels a bootstrap, appropriate for a startup, but we're beyond that now." The rebranding initiative he launched came with a 6-figure budget and a new marketing agency that had worked with him at his previous companies. Our existing marketing team, who had grown our brand recognition through creative guerrilla tactics and genuine customer relationships, were sidelined. The new logo replaced our Horizon sunrise with an abstract geometric shape. Our tagline, "Data that illuminates possibilities," became enterprise analytics solutions for optimal business outcomes. It was professional but generic, stripping away the personality and mission that had connected with our clients. Christian began assembling his own leadership team. Douglas came aboard as Chief Revenue Officer, immediately questioning our pricing model that had been designed to make powerful analytics accessible to mid-sized businesses. Tiffany took over marketing, dismissing years of customer research in favor of glossy campaigns targeting only enterprise-level clients. Raymond joined as Chief Operating Officer, implementing rigid corporate hierarchies in our previously collaborative environment. This inner circle soon became the decision-making force at Horizon. Meetings I had once led were now scheduled when I was booked with client commitments. Critical decisions about product direction were made without my input, despite my title as Chief Innovation Officer. The physical office began to change too. The open, collaborative spaces where engineers and sales teams had once freely exchanged ideas were partitioned into cubicles. The kitchen area, where some of our best brainstorming had happened over coffee, was reduced to make room for 3 new executive offices. Christian's own office, formerly a modest space like everyone else's, was renovated with expensive furniture and an unnecessary private bathroom. One morning I arrived to find Madison, our lead developer, looking defeated. "They're eliminating remote work Fridays," she told me. The flexible work policy had been a cornerstone of our culture, allowing team members to work from anywhere 1 day a week. It had boosted productivity and morale, especially for parents on our team. Christian had canceled it with a company-wide email citing operational efficiency without consulting anyone who understood our culture. The most painful blow came when Christian shelved my innovation lab project without warning. I had been developing a machine learning framework that could revolutionize how small businesses use predictive analytics, potentially opening an entirely new market segment. "We need to focus resources on enterprise clients," Christian explained when I confronted him. "These passion projects are luxuries we can revisit once we've solidified our core business." In meetings, Christian began referring to the company's early years as our amateur phase, suggesting that everything before his arrival had been merely preparation for the real business we were becoming. When I tried to explain the intentional decisions behind our original business model, Christian would smile thinly and say, "That was appropriate for the time, but we're playing in the big leagues now." The first quarter under Christian's leadership showed what looked like impressive growth, a 15% revenue increase and higher profit margins. The board was delighted, not seeing what I could that the numbers came from slashing research and development, raising prices on loyal customers, and focusing solely on short-term gains at the expense of innovation. I tried to be supportive, despite my growing concerns. This was the natural discomfort of transition, I told myself. Change was necessary for growth. I needed to give Christian space to implement his vision, to trust the board's decision, and my own judgment in hiring him. The company was bigger than my ego or attachment to how things had been done. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I couldn't ignore the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach every time I walked into the office I had once built with so much love and purpose. Something fundamental was changing at Horizon Analytics, and not for the better. The first major red flag appeared 3 months into Christian's tenure, when Westfield Insurance, one of our earliest and most loyal clients, called to inform us they wouldn't be renewing their contract. I took the call since I had personally worked with their data science team for years. "We value our history with Horizon," Alexandra, their chief technology officer, explained, "but since your pricing increased by 40% with no additional features, we simply can't justify the expense to our board." This was news to me. I immediately checked our client management system and discovered that Christian had implemented across-the-board price hikes for existing clients without any grandfathering provisions or consultations with the account managers, who understood each relationship. Within 2 weeks, 2 more key clients departed: Brightpath Media and Continental Manufacturing. Both cited the same reasons: unexplained price increases and a sudden shift in customer service quality. The dedicated account managers who had understood their businesses had been replaced with generalists from Douglas's previous company. When I raised these concerns in the weekly executive meeting, Christian dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "Client churn is normal during a company's evolution. We're attracting larger fish now." But these weren't just any clients I countered. Westfield has been with us since year 1. They've referred at least 6 other major accounts to us. Christian's expression hardened. "Perhaps that's the problem, Alexandra. You're too emotionally attached to these legacy relationships. Business isn't personal." The statement hung in the air as other executives averted their eyes. Business had always been personal at Horizon Analytics. Understanding our clients' unique challenges and building relationships based on trust had been our competitive advantage in an industry full of faceless corporations. My role became increasingly marginalized. In meetings with my own innovation team, Christian would contradict my directives or revise project goals without consultation. My team members would look to me with confusion, and I could see their respect for my leadership eroding as I appeared powerless to maintain consistent direction. The product roadmap I had carefully developed with input from clients and engineers was scrapped in favor of what Christian called market-driven priorities. In reality, these were quick-win features that would look impressive in sales presentations but added little substantial value. The foundational work on scalable architecture and future-proofing our systems was deemed not immediately revenue-generating and defunded. The employee exodus began with Marcus, one of our most talented engineers, who had turned down offers from Google and Amazon to work with us. I joined Horizon because of the vision he told me during his exit interview. That vision doesn't exist anymore. Eleanor from Customer Success left next, followed by Gabriel from Product Development. Each departure felt like losing family members. These weren't just employees. They were people who had believed in what we were building enough to commit years of their careers to our mission. I tried addressing my concerns through proper channels, scheduling one-on-one meetings with Christian, and sending detailed emails to the board's executive committee. Christian would listen with a practiced patience, before assuring me that my concerns, while understandable from a founder's emotional perspective, didn't align with modern business realities. My emails to the board received polite acknowledgments, but little substantive response as Christian's quarterly numbers continued to impress on paper. The public undermining of my contribution to the company reached a new level at the annual Tech Forward conference. As one of few successful female founders in our industry, I had been invited to accept an innovation award for our AI-driven predictive analytics engine technology. I had personally architected over 2 years of intensive development. I sat in the audience waiting to be called up when Christian stepped onto the stage instead. On behalf of Horizon Analytics, he began, "I'm honored to accept this award for innovation that our team has developed under my leadership." The revision of history was so blatant that several industry colleagues glanced at me with confused expressions. Christian went on to outline his vision for the technology that I had created long before he joined the company, never once mentioning my name or the original team. The following week, I arrived at work to find my office being packed up. My assistant Jasmine looked distressed, as she explained Mr. Parker ordered a reorganization of the executive floor. "Your new office is on the 3rd floor near the break room." My new workspace was half the size of my previous office, located far from the engineering team I needed to collaborate with daily. The message couldn't have been clearer if Christian had written it on the wall. I was being systematically isolated and diminished. The situation reached a critical point during the launch of our enterprise dashboard product. I had raised concerns about rushing it to market before resolving known performance issues with large datasets. Christian had overruled me, pushing for a release to coincide with a major industry event. As I had feared, the product failed spectacularly during demonstrations for several major potential clients. Dashboards froze, visualizations rendered incorrectly, and in one mortifying instance, confidential test data was momentarily visible to the wrong client. Our company's reputation for reliability took a severe hit, and the sales team was left trying to rebuild trust that had been shattered by premature promises. Through all of this, I maintained meticulous documentation. Each questionable decision, every instance where warnings were ignored, all evidence of the company's cultural and strategic deterioration. I recorded it all objectively and factually, not as ammunition, but as a record of truth I might someday need. The emotional toll was immense. I would wake up at 3 a.m, my mind racing with worries about the company I had built from nothing. I questioned whether stepping back had been a terrible mistake. I wondered if fighting for control would damage the company further. Most painfully, I watched daily as the values and vision that had driven our success were erased and replaced with generic corporate platitudes. I began connecting with employees who had left, meeting them for coffee or lunch away from the office. Their stories confirmed my worst fears. Christian was creating a culture of fear and favoritism. Longtime employees were being pushed out in favor of his former colleagues. Innovation was stifled in favor of short-term metrics. "The company you built doesn't exist anymore," Alexandra told me over coffee one rainy afternoon. "It's just another soulless tech firm now. We used to change how businesses understood their data. Now we just sell expensive dashboards." After 6 months of Christian's leadership, Horizon Analytics was showing record profits on paper, but was rotting from within. Employee turnover had reached 30%. Our product innovation had stalled completely. Our industry reputation was shifting from revolutionary upstart to corporate sellout. I stood at a crossroads, torn between my desire to protect what I had built and my uncertainty about whether intervention would make things worse. That decision would soon be made for me in a way I never anticipated. The calendar invitation appeared in my inbox on a Tuesday morning with the innocuous title, Performance Alignment Discussion. Scheduled for Thursday at 4 p.m, late enough that most employees would have left for the day. The location was Christian's office rather than a conference room. No agenda attached. No other attendees. I knew immediately what was coming. Over the past 2 weeks, Christian had been unusually cordial, even going out of his way to compliment my contributions in meetings. This sudden shift after months of undermining had triggered my suspicions. I'd seen this pattern before in corporate settings. The artificial pleasantries that preceded a planned termination designed to demonstrate fair treatment for potential legal proceedings. I spent the next 2 days reviewing my employment contract, gathering notes on recent projects, and mentally rehearsing various scenarios. I called my friend William, a corporate attorney who had advised me since Horizon's early days. Document everything in the meeting, he counseled. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recordings, so don't record without permission, but take mental notes and write everything down immediately afterward. Thursday arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed carefully that morning, a structured navy suit that had seen me through countless investor meetings, subtle jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother, and the confidence that came from knowing I had built this company from nothing, but an idea and determination. The walk to Christian's office felt longer than usual. Employees glanced up as I passed some, offering sympathetic smiles that suggested rumors were already circulating. Isabella, Christian's executive assistant, couldn't quite meet my eyes when I arrived. "He's expecting you," she said softly, gesturing toward the door. "Good luck, Alexandra." Christian's office had been completely transformed from the modest space I had used as CEO. Where I had preferred a simple desk and comfortable meeting area, he had installed an enormous mahogany desk positioned to force visitors to walk a long approach. The walls, once adorned with our team photos and client success stories, now displayed his Harvard diploma and photos with celebrity tech CEOs. He remained standing when I entered, a power move straight from some outdated management playbook. "Alexandra, thank you for making time," he said, as though he were doing me a favor by scheduling this meeting. "Of course," I replied, taking a seat in front of his desk without waiting for an invitation. "Your calendar invitation mentioned performance alignment." Christian settled into his chair, leaning back with practiced casualness. "Yes, I wanted to discuss your role here at Horizon and how things have been progressing under the new organizational structure." What followed was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. He began with vague praise about my historical contribution to the company, carefully placing everything in past tense. He then pivoted to concerns about my adjustment difficulties and resistance to necessary evolution. "We've noticed your tendency to undermine new initiatives by referencing how things were previously done," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "This creates confusion among the team about whose direction they should follow." I opened the folder to find a performance improvement plan, a document typically used to create a paper trail before termination. It cited instances where I had supposedly interfered with his leadership, though the examples were either fabricated or grossly mischaracterized. "There's also the matter of your current role's relevance," Christian continued, his tone becoming more direct. "The Chief Innovation Officer position was created to ease your transition, but frankly, innovation can be managed through normal R&D channels. It's creating unnecessary organizational complexity." I maintained a neutral expression, though I felt a surge of indignation. The role hadn't been created as a consolation prize. It reflected the value of having leadership focus specifically on future technologies, rather than quarterly results. "I've been discussing options with HR and the executive committee," he said, reaching for another document. "We're prepared to offer a generous severance package. 6 months' salary, accelerated vesting of your existing shares, and a consulting agreement for the transition period." Then came the line that would prove to be his greatest miscalculation. "Let's be practical, Alexandra. Everyone is replaceable in business, even founders. It's time to make room for the next generation of leadership." The calm that settled over me in that moment was almost surreal. After months of anxiety and emotional turmoil, the clarity of this direct confrontation was almost refreshing. Christian had finally shown his full hand. "May I ask some questions about this proposal?" I kept my voice steady, revealing nothing of my thoughts. Christian seemed relieved by my apparent acceptance. "Of course. I want to make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone." "When did the executive committee discuss my termination?" I don't recall seeing this on any meeting agenda. My first question was deliberately specific. Christian hesitated briefly. "It was handled discreetly to maintain professionalism. So it wasn't raised in an official capacity." "Interesting." I made a mental note of this admission. "And the board, have they reviewed this performance improvement plan?" "The board entrusts day-to-day personnel decisions to me," he replied, a hint of impatience entering his voice. "They're focused on strategy, not staffing details." Each question revealed more gaps in his process, more corners cut in his haste to remove me. I asked about specific metrics showing my underperformance documentation of the supposed incidents cited in the improvement plan and consultations with other executives about my contributions. Christian's answers grew increasingly vague and defensive. The confidence he had displayed at the start of our meeting was visibly eroding. These are standard corporate transitions, Alexandra. You're making this more complicated than necessary. Finally, he pushed a formal termination letter across the desk, his patience clearly exhausted. I had hoped to do this amicably, but I see you're going to make this difficult. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. I stood slowly, gathering the documents he had provided. I appreciate your directness, Christian. I'll need to review these papers with my attorney, of course. This isn't negotiable, he said flatly. The decision has been made. Decisions can always be reconsidered, I replied, maintaining eye contact, especially when they're made without proper authority. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. What do you mean by that? I suppose we'll find out at the next board meeting, won't we? I turned and walked toward the door, maintaining the composed demeanor that had carried me through countless business crises over the years. This is a mistake, Alexandra. Christian called after me. Don't damage your legacy with a messy exit. I paused at the door. My legacy is Horizon Analytics, Christian. I built it to last beyond any single person's leadership, including yours. The door closed behind me with a soft click that belied the seismic shift that had just occurred. Isabella looked up, concern evident in her expression. Are you all right? She asked quietly. I will be, I assured her. Change is coming, Isabella, just not the change Christian is expecting. I walked through the office with my head high, aware of eyes following my progress. No security guards appeared to escort me, perhaps another detail Christian had failed to arrange properly. I gathered a few personal items from my downsized office, nodded to my team members, and made my way to the parking garage. Only when I was alone in my car did I allow myself a moment to process what had happened. The company I had built from nothing, that I had poured 7 years of my life into, that still legally belonged mostly to me. Christian thought he could simply push me out with a folder of paperwork and condescending platitudes. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and made a decision. It was time to reclaim what was mine. The weekend after my confrontation with Christian gave me valuable time to process my emotions and develop a strategic response. I moved through stages of anger, hurt, and disbelief before settling into a calm determination that would prove more powerful than any reactive emotion. Saturday morning, I called Janet, my former boss and mentor, who had supported Horizon Analytics from its earliest days. We met for breakfast at a quiet cafe far from the office, where I recounted the confrontation with Christian in detail. He's made a fundamental mistake, Janet said after listening carefully. He's treating this like a standard corporate power play without understanding the unique dynamics of founder-led companies. But more importantly, he's unaware of your majority ownership. I've kept that information private for good reason, I explained. I wanted whoever led the company to do so because they believed in our mission, not because they feared the founder looking over their shoulder. Janet stirred her coffee thoughtfully. That principle is admirable, Alexandra, but it's time to reassert your authority. Not out of ego, but because your vision for the company is being systematically dismantled. Next, I met with William, my attorney friend, who had helped draft our company's original operating agreements. We spent 3 hours in his office reviewing the bylaws, shareholder agreements, and board responsibilities. The termination is procedurally flawed, William confirmed, highlighting key sections of our governance documents. As majority shareholder, any action to remove you from the company requires either your consent or a supermajority board vote, with specific notice requirements that weren't followed. But more concerning is what I'm seeing in these recent financial decisions. William had identified several transactions that pushed ethical boundaries, resources being diverted to a new subsidiary that seemed designed primarily to create executive bonuses, intellectual property being licensed to third parties on suspiciously favorable terms, cost-cutting that undermined core product quality while creating the appearance of improved profitability. This goes beyond mismanagement, William warned. Some of these decisions could constitute breach of fiduciary duty. I spent Sunday researching Christian's previous companies, finding concerning patterns. Both had shown impressive short-term growth under his leadership before being sold only to struggle with product and culture issues afterward. Former employees described similar tactics: marginalization of founders, replacement of existing teams with loyalists, and aggressive accounting practices that made finances look better than reality. By Monday morning, I had compiled a comprehensive document of every questionable decision Christian had made since joining Horizon Analytics, with detailed analysis of both short and long-term impacts. I categorized them by severity, from simple strategic disagreements to potential violations of our operating agreement. I called our Chief Financial Officer, Jacob, whom I had hired 3 years earlier, and who had always maintained professional integrity above office politics. We met discreetly at a coffee shop near his home. "I've been running 2 sets of projections," Jacob confessed after I shared my concerns. "The official ones that Christian presents to the board, and my own analysis that accounts for the long-term consequences of these decisions. The divergence is alarming." Jacob provided me with financial projections, showing that while current quarters looked excellent, the company was on track for serious problems within 18 months. Customer acquisition costs were rising as our reputation suffered. Technical debt was accumulating as engineers cut corners to meet unrealistic deadlines. Employee turnover was creating massive hidden costs in recruitment and training. "The board isn't seeing the complete picture," Jacob explained. "Christian only presents the metrics that support his narrative." Armed with this information, I began reaching out individually to board members. Thomas, our venture capital representative, agreed to breakfast on Tuesday morning. "I've had some concerns about the cultural shift," Thomas admitted, after I presented a portion of my findings. "Several key engineers who left have joined companies in our portfolio, and they've shared troubling stories. But the financial results have been so strong that it was difficult to justify intervention." When I showed him Jacob's complete projections, Thomas's expression grew serious. "This changes things. If these numbers are accurate, we're headed for a cliff disguised as a mountain peak." Sophia, our board member with legal expertise, was more immediately alarmed. "These IP licensing agreements are deeply concerning," she said during our phone conversation. "They create significant exposure while undervaluing our core assets." "Who approved these terms?" "They were presented to the board as standard licensing arrangements," I explained. "The details were handled by Christian's team without usual oversight." By Thursday, I had spoken with 4 of the 7 board members, carefully presenting evidence tailored to each person's area of expertise and concern. I wasn't lobbying for specific action, but ensuring they had complete information before the emergency board meeting I had requested. The most shocking discovery came that evening when Isabella, Christian's assistant, requested to meet me privately. We met at a restaurant 20 miles from the office, where she nervously slid a folder across the table. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what's happening isn't right." The folder contained emails between Christian and executives at Datavore Analytics, one of our main competitors. The correspondence outlined a plan for Datavore to acquire our most valuable intellectual property after Christian had completed his restructuring, a euphemism for pushing me and other original team members out. Christian stood to receive a lucrative position at Datavore once the deal was complete. "He's not building the company," I realized aloud. "He's stripping it for parts." "That's why I had to show you," Isabella said. "People's livelihoods are at stake. The company matters to us, to all the employees who believed in what you built." This evidence of clear conflict of interest transformed my approach from defensive to proactive. This wasn't just about my position or even my vision for the company. It was about preventing the wholesale dismantling of Horizon Analytics for personal gain. I spent Friday preparing my presentation for the board, organizing evidence into a compelling narrative that went beyond personalities to focus on the company's future. William helped me structure the legal arguments while Jacob refined the financial analysis. By evening, I had a comprehensive case that any reasonable board would have to take seriously. That night, I took time for myself, a long walk along the Charles River, watching the lights reflect on the water as I contemplated what lay ahead. The company had been my identity for so long that this fight felt existential. Yet I found unexpected calm in the knowledge that I was fighting not just for myself, but for the vision that had inspired so many to join our journey. Whatever happened at Monday's board meeting, I would face it with the same determination that had carried me through every other challenge in building Horizon Analytics. The difference was that, this time, I had truth evidence and 61% of the company's shares on my side. The boardroom at Horizon Analytics had always reflected our company culture: modern but unpretentious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. I arrived 30 minutes early on Monday morning, wanting time to prepare mentally and observe board members as they arrived. Thomas entered first, giving me a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Sophia came next, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes conveying support. Michael and the other board members filtered in gradually, some looking curious, others uncomfortable. They knew an emergency board meeting was unusual, especially one called by the founder rather than the CEO. Christian arrived precisely at 9, flanked by Douglas and Tiffany. He faltered momentarily upon seeing me already seated at the table, then quickly recovered, offering a tight smile. "Alexandra, I'm surprised to see you here. This is an executive board meeting." His tone was pleasant but dismissive. "As a board member and company founder, I received the same invitation you did," I replied calmly. Before Christian could respond, Thomas called the meeting to order. "We have serious matters to discuss today. Let's begin with the agenda." Christian smoothly took control, distributing folders to each board member. "I've prepared a presentation on our strategic restructuring initiatives, including some necessary leadership changes." For the next 20 minutes, Christian delivered a masterfully crafted narrative about Horizon Analytics' transformation under his leadership. Glossy slides showed impressive revenue growth, cost reductions, and apparent market expansion. He painted himself as the corporate savior who had professionalized our promising but amateur operation. "Which brings me to a difficult but necessary decision," Christian said, his expression shifting to practiced concern. "Alexandra has been struggling to adapt to our new direction. Despite attempts at performance improvement, it's become clear that her continued presence is creating organizational confusion and impeding our progress." He turned to face me directly. "I've made the executive decision to terminate Alexandra's employment effective immediately. I'm bringing this to the board as a courtesy notification rather than for approval, as it falls under my operational authority." Several board members glanced my way, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort, Christian interpreting their silence as acceptance continued smoothly. "I've prepared a generous severance package that recognizes Alexandra's founding contribution while allowing us to move forward with clear leadership. I'll need a formal vote to approve the severance terms." "Before we vote on anything," Thomas interjected, "I believe Alexandra has requested time to address the board." Christian's confidence wavered slightly. "That's not really necessary. This is a standard executive transition." "Our bylaws are clear," Sophia interrupted, her legal background evident in her precise tone. "Any board member may address the full board on matters of company governance. Alexandra has that right." With a tight smile, Christian gestured toward me. "Of course, though I'd ask that we keep this brief. We have other matters to discuss." I stood and walked to the front of the room, connecting my laptop to the presentation screen. "Thank you for making time for this discussion. What I'm about to share goes beyond questions of my employment to fundamental issues of company direction and fiduciary responsibility." For the next 40 minutes, I methodically presented the evidence I had gathered. Financial projections showing the long-term damage of Christian's short-term strategies. Documentation of key client departures and employee turnover. Side-by-side comparisons of product quality before and after feature cuts. I was careful to focus on business impacts rather than personal grievances. While revenues appear to be growing, I explained, showing Jacob's projections, customer acquisition costs have increased by 78%. Our net retention rate has fallen from 93% to 67%, meaning we're losing existing clients faster than we're acquiring new ones. Board members leaned forward, their expressions increasingly concerned as the complete picture emerged. Christian's face had hardened into a mask of controlled anger. "These selective metrics don't reflect the broader transformation underway," he interjected. "Change is always uncomfortable, especially for those attached to the past." I acknowledged his point before continuing. "Change is indeed necessary for growth. The question is whether these specific changes serve the company's long-term interests or undermine them." I moved to my final and most damning evidence, the correspondence between Christian and Datavore Analytics, revealing his plan to sell off our core intellectual property while positioning himself for a lucrative exit. This represents a clear conflict of interest and breach of fiduciary duty, I concluded. Our most valuable assets are being systematically devalued to facilitate their acquisition by a competitor with personal benefits flowing to our CEO. The room fell silent. Christian's face had drained of color, but he quickly recovered, rising to his feet. "These are baseless accusations from a founder who can't accept professional management," he declared. "I move that we proceed with the vote on Alexandra's termination immediately." "Actually," I said quietly, "I don't believe that vote would be valid under our governance structure." Christian's expression shifted to condescension. "The CEO has clear authority on personnel matters. The board's role is strategic oversight, not micromanagement of staffing." "That's generally true," I agreed. "However, there's a specific provision in our bylaws regarding founders and major shareholders." I nodded to William, who distributed copies of the relevant sections. "This is unnecessary legal maneuvering," Christian said dismissively. "The decision has been made. This vote is merely a formality to approve the severance terms." I smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "I'm afraid I can't approve any severance terms, Christian. You see, as the majority shareholder with 61% ownership of Horizon Analytics, I don't approve of my own termination." The words hung in the air for a long moment. Christian stared at me, his expression transitioning from confusion to disbelief to dawning horror as the implications sank in. "That's impossible," he finally managed. "The ownership structure is diversified across the board and investors. No single person holds majority control." Thomas cleared his throat. "Actually, Christian Alexandra's majority ownership is documented in our shareholder agreements. It's unusual but not unprecedented for founders to maintain controlling interest while bringing in a professional CEO." "Why wasn't I informed of this?" Christian demanded, looking around the table accusingly. "It wasn't relevant to your ability to lead the company effectively," I explained calmly. "Or at least it shouldn't have been. Leadership isn't about control. It's about vision, integrity, and building something of lasting value." Christian attempted to regain control of the meeting, but the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Board members who had been quietly uncomfortable were now openly questioning his decisions, citing concerns from my presentation. "If these projections are accurate, we're facing serious sustainability issues," Michael noted, "and these communications with Datavor raise significant legal and ethical questions." I move that we vote on Christian's continued employment as CEO, Sophia proposed formally. "Given the evidence presented, I believe we have grounds for termination for cause." Christian's face flushed with anger. "This is a coordinated coup. You can't possibly make this decision based on one biased presentation." "The financial data comes directly from our systems," Jacob confirmed, speaking for the first time. "I can verify its accuracy." The vote was called and recorded 6, in favor of termination, 1 abstention. Christian's tenure as CEO of Horizon Analytics had come to an abrupt end. "This is a mistake you'll regret," Christian said, gathering his papers. "I'll be speaking with my attorneys about breach of contract and defamation." "Your contract includes clear provisions regarding conflicts of interest and fiduciary duty," William noted calmly. "I'd advise careful consideration before pursuing litigation that would make these documents public record." As Christian and his executive allies exited the boardroom, a palpable weight lifted from the atmosphere. Thomas turned to me with a questioning expression. "What happens now, Alexandra? We need leadership continuity to stabilize the situation." I had anticipated this question and prepared my answer carefully. "I propose appointing Jacob as interim CEO while we conduct a proper search for permanent leadership. He understands our finances, has maintained integrity throughout this situation, and has the trust of the original team." The board quickly approved this recommendation, along with my return to an active role overseeing product innovation and company culture during the transition. As the meeting concluded, Sophia approached me privately. "You could have asserted your ownership from the beginning. Why wait until things reach this point?" I wanted to give him a genuine chance to lead, based on merit, not fear of the founder's control, I explained. And truthfully, I needed to be certain that intervention was truly necessary for the company, not just my ego. "Well," Sophia said with a smile, "I think we can all agree that 61% of certainty is a solid majority." The hours following the board meeting were a whirlwind of activity. Jacob, Thomas, and I convened an emergency executive team meeting to establish immediate priorities and communication strategies. By noon, we had drafted a company-wide email explaining leadership changes in straightforward terms, emphasizing continuity of vision rather than dwelling on the circumstances of Christian's departure. "Transparency is essential, but we need to balance honesty with stability," I advised as we refined the message. Our employees deserve to know that the company is returning to its foundation, but we don't need to detail every misstep that led here. The immediate reaction throughout the office was a mixture of shock relief and cautious optimism. Many employees who had joined during Christian's tenure were understandably concerned about another leadership change. Those who had been with us longer responded with barely concealed celebration. "It feels like we can breathe again," Madison told me, when I stopped by the engineering department that afternoon, like the company we loved might actually come back. My first priority was damage control with our clients. I personally called the 3 major accounts we had lost, explaining the leadership changes and inviting them to meet about potential renewal. 2 agreed, immediately appreciating the personal outreach. The third had already signed with a competitor but expressed willingness to reconsider when that contract ended. The question of my own role required careful consideration. The board suggested I return as CEO, but I recognized the dangers of appearing to orchestrate a return to power. "I think it sends a healthier message if I don't simply reclaim the CEO position," I explained during our strategy session. "Jacob should continue as interim CEO while we search for the right permanent leader. I'll take an active role as executive chair focused on innovation and culture, working alongside whoever we select." This approach allowed me to help guide the company's recovery without creating the impression that the entire exercise had been about restoring my control. It also acknowledged that Horizon Analytics had grown beyond the stage where a founder needed to handle day-to-day operations. The deeper work of rebuilding began in the following weeks. We conducted detailed financial reviews, discovering that the situation was both better and worse than we had feared. The core business remained strong, but Christian's aggressive accounting had masked serious operational issues that would take months to resolve. We immediately rolled back several of Christian's most damaging policies. The flexible work schedule returned, collaborative spaces were restored, and we implemented a temporary freeze on price increases to stabilize client relationships. The cultural healing would take longer than these structural changes. Trust had been damaged, particularly among mid-level managers caught between conflicting directives during Christian's tenure. To address this, we established weekly town halls where any employee could ask questions directly to leadership without filters or repercussions. We lost our way for a while, I acknowledged, during the first of these sessions. But the soul of Horizon Analytics wasn't in leadership titles or office layouts. It was in our shared commitment to using data to help businesses make better decisions. That hasn't changed, and it will guide us forward. 3 months after the board meeting, we had stabilized operations and begun rebuilding our innovative edge. Jacob was proving to be an exceptional interim CEO, combining financial discipline with genuine respect for our culture and mission. The board voted to extend his interim period to a full year, giving us time to conduct a thorough search for permanent leadership. The most meaningful changes were in our governance structure. We implemented clearer reporting requirements for the CEO, established an ethics committee with employee representation, and created more transparent communication channels between the board and company operations. Most importantly, we codified our core values into the corporate bylaws, making them explicit requirements for leadership rather than aspirational statements. "This isn't about restricting executive authority," I explained to the board. "It's about ensuring alignment between leadership decisions and the company's foundational principles." On a personal level, the experience forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about leadership and control. I had stepped back with good intentions, wanting to give new leadership room to operate without founder interference. But in doing so, I had abdicated my responsibility to protect what we had built. The lesson wasn't that I needed to maintain control, I shared during a leadership retreat 6 months after the transition. It was that empowering others doesn't mean abandoning oversight. Trust requires verification, especially when people's livelihoods and shared mission are at stake. Perhaps the most significant long-term change was our implementation of an employee ownership program. We allocated 10% of company equity to a pool that would be distributed among employees based on tenure and contribution. This wasn't just financial compensation, but a structural alignment of interests that would prevent any future leader from treating the company as a personal fiefdom. Horizon Analytics was never built by a single person, I explained when announcing the program. It's only right that ownership reflects that reality. 1 year after Christian's departure, Horizon Analytics had not only recovered, but was thriving in ways that balanced sustainable growth with innovation. Our client retention had returned to industry-leading levels, Our employee turnover had dropped to below 10% annually. Most importantly, we were again creating technology that solved meaningful problems rather than chasing quarterly metrics. We ultimately hired Barbara Mitchell as our permanent CEO, an experienced technology leader with a track record of ethical leadership and collaborative innovation. Unlike Christian's splashy entrance, Barbara integrated quietly into the company culture, spending her first month in listening sessions with teams across the organization before proposing any changes. "I'm not here to replace Alexandra's vision," she told me during our first private meeting. "I'm here to help scale it responsibly, while preserving what makes this company special." The experience transformed my understanding of power and leadership. I had founded Horizon Analytics believing that success came from brilliant ideas and relentless execution. I now understood that lasting success required something more fundamental: systems and culture that could survive beyond any individual leader's tenure. My 61% ownership had saved the company in a moment of crisis, but our long-term protection came from the distributed ownership, transparent governance, and shared values we implemented afterward. No single percentage, no matter how large, could substitute for a genuinely aligned organization. 2 years after the boardroom confrontation, I received an email from Isabella Christian's former assistant, who had provided the crucial evidence of his dealings with Datavor. She had moved to a technology nonprofit and was thriving in her new role. "I still think about that day sometimes," she wrote. "It taught me that speaking up matters even when it's terrifying. The company today feels like what I always imagined it could be when I first joined a place where innovation and ethics aren't competing priorities." Her message captured the essence of what we had learned through the entire experience. The companies worth building aren't defined by ownership percentages or executive titles, but by the integrity of their mission and the alignment between words and actions. Have you ever had to stand up for something you built when others tried to take it away? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this corporate takedown satisfied your sense of justice, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating business challenges with integrity. Remember, true ownership isn't just about legal percentages. It's about staying true to your vision and values no matter what title you hold. Thank you for listening, and until next time, know your worth and own your power.